Bobby. All right, seeing a bunch of friendly faces. Hi, Amy June. Okay, so I think it's time. We've got a lot of people in our anonymous crowd backstage. It looks like more than 60 folks listening in, and all of our panelists here who are ready to talk to you. So let's get this started. Welcome to the Drupal.org engineering update. So this is where we talk about all of the kind of key initiatives that the Drupal Association engineering team works on. We're actually here with kind of the extended family of the Drupal Association engineering team. Let's see, one super volunteer, one member of our infrastructure support, and Rachel is the community liaison who interfaces wherever the community overlaps the engineering needs. So I'll do introductions in just a moment. We'll be going through a lot of the work that was done over the last 6 months and talk a little bit about the future as well. So we hope you're as excited as we are. Feel free to throw in questions as we go. I'm not sure how much time we'll have at the end. It's a packed update, but we'll see how it goes. So hopping in to the introductions. In the last 3 DrupalCons, I forgot to put real names on this slide. I always put on Drupal.org usernames, but I fixed it this time. We've got both. We'll go left to right across the top of this slide, so I'll start first. You've seen me in several places at this event so far. I'm Tim Lennon, Hestenet on Drupal.org. I'm the CTO at the Drupal Association. I've been here close to 6 years now, and just really proud of this team and what it accomplishes. Oh yes, there's a highlight that Brendan just mentioned in the chat. If you want to make any particular video feed larger, you can just double click on that feed like the slides to make them bigger and easier to see. Neil, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Neil Drum. I am a kind of full stack developer, do like site building, front end work, build bits and pieces of everything in development.
Cool. Ryan, why don't you go ahead next?
Howdy, I'm Ryan Aslett, Mixologic. I work on the packages.drupal.org, kind of enabling Composer to work with the with Drupal. I also am the maintainer of Drupal CI and the whole CI system that tests Drupal. And I generally have my hands in a lot of infra kind of other stuff as well. And today's one of those days where I wish I had that third half of a bagel because the first 2 were so good. I'm just like, I wish I had that third half.
Excellent. All right, Brendan, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. Hi, I'm Brendan Lane, B-Man on Drupal.org. I'm a developer here. Do a lot of feature development on Drupal.org, events.drupal.org. Recently put together the community events section of the site with a lot of help from Rachel, kind of pipelining requirements and requests to me. So that was great. Looking forward to doing more of that once we get over the DrupalCon hump and get back to real work.
Awesome. Thanks, Brendan. Rachel, why don't you go ahead?
Hi, I'm Rachel Lawson, and it's definitely Rachel Lawson, not Norfolk, which is my ID on Drupal.org, Twitter, everywhere. And people start thinking it's my surname too. It's not. I work as the Drupal Association community liaison. I essentially spend a lot of time chatting to the community, finding out what's really going to help us grow as a community and work better time, and then giving or making increasingly complex and challenging tasks to the engineering team. I think it's probably the better way of putting it. I really want you to do this. Can you do this?
Fair enough. Narayan, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Narayan Newton, or N Newton on what used to be IRC. I am the lead system administrator and work for Tag One Consulting, and have been in some form the lead system admin for Drupal.org for a long time.
Pretty much since the beginning. He knows where all of the bubblegum and baling wire is to keep the servers running. And finally, Michael, please introduce yourself as well.
I'm Michael Hess. I've been working on the infrastructure for, I don't know, almost 10 years-ish now. And Narayan, are you able to help me with my Wi-Fi, considering this is a DrupalCon?
No. I retired from that about 8 years ago.
Perfect. Well, thank you, everyone. This is a brief overview of the agenda. I'm going to skip right past this, but as you can see, it's chock full of different things that we're going to talk about. One thing I want to say at the outset, you may have seen this in the DrupalCon Amsterdam slides, if you happen to be there with us. Drupal.org, which we maintain as an engineering team, is increasingly central to Drupal itself. It increasingly provides services that support the Drupal software and not just services that support the community. So whether that's the composer endpoints, the code repositories, the update server, the localization server, handling of security advisories, these are all services that are supported by the Drupal Association engineering team and are really more part of the Drupal product than they are just part of our community home and community website. So the support of the Drupal Association supporting partners and sponsors is what makes that possible and lets us do our piece of helping the community to build Drupal. I also want to just pause for a moment to thank everybody. I suspect that almost everybody who's attending this session probably participated in the Drupal Cares campaign in some way. This was the major fundraiser that we did in April when we knew that there would be a gap because of the COVID situation. The funding you provided, I mean, to put it bluntly, it saved jobs over here at the association. It got us the ability to keep going and even host a DrupalCon at all. And it got us to a sustainable place to get through this year and into next year. So your support was really vital and very much appreciated. As part of the Drupal Cares campaign, there were some updates that Neil on our team helped to implement. We had some requests for different ways to participate as a member. So there was now a monthly membership option, higher tier annual membership options, and some updated options for supporting partner programs. I'm going to skip on through because we've got so much to go, but there's some awesome stuff there. Another project that Neil worked on in particular was metrics on Drupal.org. And Neil, do you want to talk a little bit about these kinds of visualizations that you put together, perhaps?
Sure. Screen's frozen for me, so I'm just going to talk and assume that something relevant's showing.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, the first two that have been there for quite a while, I think Moshe Weitzman built an initial version of this that we cleaned up and deployed. Is nodes and users created by month, and those are not really great numbers because users, those are mostly spammers. Like we didn't get 40K people 2 months in 2013 or whatever that is. And nodes is just not a measure of activity. It's just some piece of software. So going to more breaking it up into things that represent actual contribution to the project, tangible things that people found useful. So that's issue credit. And breaking it down even further into how many people are contributing as volunteers on behalf of organizations or both. And also we started collecting some numbers around the demographics in the last few years. So we're starting to get more numbers there for our diversity and who's coming to us from an underserved or underrepresented community, not just color or nationality or anything like that. There's the Big 10, Big 8, Rig 10 categories. And this page will prompt you to fill out that question on your user profile if you haven't already. Yeah, when I was down at Drupal South, I decided to add where people were in the world. So North America, Europe, and all of that. And the credits, those have been there for a while as well. Those are part of the original metrics. And yeah, there's been a little bit of uptick with Drupal 9 being released. It's a little hard to say why commits, they could be large or small. So upticks are good, but it's hard to say whether this is more people or actually the second one, commit authors by month. That's the important one. So more people, maybe they're committing less, but a number of people I think is more important. And how many times they can type git push.
And I think this last metric area is one of the more interesting ones because it shows of the current people involved in contributing, getting credited on issues, how many years they've been on Drupal.org. So you can see that stacked up cohort of whether it's the largest group. It looks like it's probably the group of people who've been around for about a year, followed by the group less than a year, and then these equal cohorts of people contributing to the project based on how long they've been around. So just some of how our community works.
And
we
have a steady stream of new people who have been contributing for less than a year, and the bars aren't getting that much thinner as they go up, so people are staying.
Yeah. Neil, I'm skipping ahead to the weekly project usage one. Could you give some final thoughts on that one?
That's part of the semantic versioning and really Drupal 8 or Drupal 9. And what's more important is, at least for core, are you on 8.7, 8.8, 9.0, 9.1? So this graph's broken up by that now.
Yeah, so we can get more granular data about which minor versions people are actually using. I wanted to talk briefly about community demographics while we're on the subject of metrics. So just so that you have kind of a general idea, we may publish a blog post on this sort of thing later. We now have 24,000 members of our community who have filled out the representation information in their profile, the demographic fields. So that's up by 25%, and that's roughly 37% of users who were active in the last year. And this is the breakdown of those people who have chosen to report the data. So we get a pretty interesting sample of all these different axes of representation that are part of our community. And of those 37%, we actually see, if we break it down by just those respondents, we actually see very similar numbers across those fields. So our sample size is getting large enough that the data seems consistent. Just to mention this really quickly, I did some comparisons with other organizations and their recent reports. You can see here just briefly sort of Drupal's current composition based on our respondents versus, say, the GitHub community survey, random US companies, tech or non-tech, and Google and Microsoft as some representation. So there's some action that we're taking. This was talked about pretty extensively in the Drupal Association update, but there's some staff trainings going on, some work to recruit experts in the field, and things like the expanded scholarships that brought so many more people here to DrupalCon. Next, I'd like to talk about the community events feature on Drupal.org. So let's have Rachel, could you kick off kind of what the ask was from the event organizers working group?
Yeah, so we spent a lot of time with the event organizers working group in their very early days, working out what was it they wanted to achieve, what was it they wanted to do, and how they. And one of the things they talked about was having a better understanding of the data behind events. All events are driven by numbers of people, financial data, but also the types of people who are sponsoring events, the type of people who are talking at events, the type of people who volunteer at events and organize them. So we spent a lot of time looking at how we could create an events listing that would show events and have use and value to our wider community, but also very specifically collected extra data that we could use for recognizing and engaging people and organizations in the community with regard to supporting events, growing events, making events an important part of Drupal. And we spent a lot of time how shall we say, discussing fields and what they should achieve in a Drupal node. When we eventually came up with what we have now. So we built a whole bunch of user stories. We literally had user stories, which is lovely. And we handed those over to the engineering team. And actually, it's coming along. You know, there's quite a lot of feedback and bits and pieces that we're still improving, but it's getting there, and we're really happy.
Awesome. Brendan, could you talk a little bit about how these features were built and kind of what went into the design from the technical point of view?
Sure. That's an interesting topic. It feels like a very long time ago, but it wasn't. So, I mean, first off, we had to figure out how to get building maps onto Drupal.org. So that was a exercise in figuring out what modules did what we needed and not way more than we needed. I'm trying to remember the name. I just blanked of the module we wound up going with. I think it's Leaflet. I could be wrong.
Leaflet, yeah.
Yeah. So because a big part of this, people like going to web pages that look semi-interactive, and it's easy at a glance to kind of see where something is when you have a map on a page. You know, if something is taking place in a city you're not familiar with a map on the page, you don't have to go Google where this is to see how feasible it is for you to be able to go. It was interesting because I was a part of some of the discussions very early on, and then for a long time, while more discussions were happening, I was involved in other projects. And then right at the end, when it was like, oh, hey, we need to build this now, I came back into the project, and things had changed, decisions had been made, and I didn't really know that. So it was really interesting working back and forth with Rachel to figure out what we needed and what we wanted and how we wanted to do that. So it's been an iterative process. It's still very early. There's a lot more we would love to do here. But we thought it would be better to have something that people can start putting data into and using, and then we would have a way to collect data on their experience and then use that to inform the next chunks of the project. Like initially, we'd had some requests to record some data about events, you know, like money spent and sponsors and stuff like that. And then, you know, a little pushback when we realized, oh, fields are available in the API, and maybe, you know, sponsors don't want to necessarily disclose that information to the world. So, you know, stuff like that pops up when you're working through things like this is always interesting. And so, yeah, we just careful consideration as we're moving forward, deploying things. But it's been fun, and I'm looking forward to doing
and
it.
built in really the you know, the kind of the standard Drupal way. These are content types, entity references, views, all of those usual things. And it's available now for people to request to be added by the moderators and showcase their own events and start using the tool. So really a good feature that came purely from community requests and via Rachel as the community liaison. Speaking of which, there's also a new contributor guide feature available on Drupal.org. And I want to give a particular thank you to Jennifer Hodgson and the documentation contributors who've been deeply involved in this process. Let's see, Rachel, why don't you talk about this one again just a little bit in terms of what it is and the basic structure of how it goes. We'll have to move relatively quickly. But
so way back when we started to look at the whole / community area, one of the things that I found frustrating was the Getting Involved guide is great. It's got lots of content, but it's so hard to find what you want. Very hard, very hard. So a whole team of us, including Jennifer Hodgson and lots of other people, spent a bit of time going, well, we could reorganize it and all this type of stuff. And in the end, we said, no, we should make a really big change. So what we said is we should create a model of the community. We should data model who the community is. and which is a sort of a radical thing to do with a piece of software that's intentionally built to data model things. So we created 3 content types, for want of a better description. There's a lot of tasks that happen in Drupal, things that people do to make the community work. They could be testing a patch, they could be creating a patch, they could be updating an out-of-date patch, although of course we won't need to do that soon, etc. It could be writing lots of different things, it could be writing documentation, whatever. So that's task. Now, to perform a task well, and to know whether you're going to be able to perform it, you may or may not need 1 or more skills. So we're going to have a definition of different skills. Yeah. Also, each skill should tell you how to both know if somebody has the skill, so that someone can say, do I have this skill? Yes or no, and how to obtain that skill, be that how to use Git or something, yeah, or mentor a person in Drupal. Then once we've got those going, then we will introduce contributor roles. Now, these will be things like a mentoring lead or a mentor. Yeah. So a Drupal mentor will be a contributor role, which will be made up of lots of tasks, and it will inevitably have skills that you will require to fulfill the role. And because each skill now has a definition of how to know if someone's got it, we know if someone's actually capable of doing that role. Also, it will allow people to say, hey, these are the skills I might learn in the role. So you can see how you're going to move forwards and how you're going to progress your Drupal contributor career through the roles that you can move on through. And each role might also say, hey, you've been doing this role for a while. Why don't you use the skills that you've learned to go do these other things as well? So we can help encourage people to continue to grow over time. And then eventually we'll be able to get to the point where we can attach roles to people, so we know who's going on and doing things in our community. We can celebrate their work more, etc., etc. Also, someone can come along to our role browser that's in the contributor guide and say, hey, I've got these skills. Which roles can I get involved in because my skills will help? Or look at it the other way and say, I want to learn these skills. How can I get involved in the community and learn them on the job? So we're hoping that this is going to dramatically change how people interact with the community side of documentation.
Thank you, Rachel. So as you can see, there's already to browse through the existing tasks and skills that have already been created. There's also a contribution opportunity happening this week and on the Friday contribution day to help build this out further. So you can continue to take a look at what we're using as the new set of onboarding tools for Drupal contributors. I'm now going to switch into sort of the infrastructural side, developer services side of Drupal.org and the services that we do, particularly packaging and Drupal CI. So there's a couple of things that happened from the packaging and composer support in packaging side. Ryan, do you want to talk a little bit about the challenges after Drupal 8.8 and through Drupal 9 in our packaging pipeline?
One of the main things that happened in Drupal 8.8 was the goal of making Drupal composer ready out of the box, because we kept running into these situations where users would download Drupal and they would start using it, and they would run into a situation where they needed to use Composer to add a module that had a Composer dependency, and their system was broken, and it was not a great state for people to be in. So the Composer initiative got Drupal kind of wrangled up into a situation where now it is able to be, you can start with a tarball if that's what your needs are, and then actually transition over to using Composer if that was what you need to do. But in order to make that happen, we had to build the tarball using Composer, and that required us to kind of rethink the way that we do our packaging pipeline. Because before, it was sort of a lot of Drupal hooks and just sort of a Jenkins job that built the tarball out of a Git repo. But now it's no longer built out of a Git repo. It's assembled using Composer. So we made a lot of changes to it. It's nice now because now we have like a nice, this step happens, and this step happens, and then this step happens. It allows us to kind of see what's going on behind the scenes in our CI infrastructure. And so that'll be something that we can continue to add to and continue to make changes to the way that Drupal core itself is built. Because the repo is no longer the product. It's the product is something that gets built out of the repo. And so that was kind of the main thing that we did there to
yeah. And this has other sort of follow-on impacts. So Michael, for example, maybe you can talk about this a little bit, even though it's kind of behind the scenes. The security team and the core maintainers have a sort of packaging process that occurs for security releases. And this whole change affected that too. Do you want to just maybe introduce people to why it is that it has its own process?
So for security releases, depending on the release, we sometimes actually do the Git commits to a private repo 24 hours before the release, so that at the time we're doing the actual releases, we're all ready to go. And so, this pipelining work that Ryan spent a lot of work on is really critical to making sure security releases happen smoothly and efficiently. And in the past, we've spent a lot of time waiting for packaging to run. And that this is now getting faster.
Awesome. Okay, so let's go on. Jess, I see your note. Jess from the core team is in the chat and was deeply involved in this process as well. I'm not totally sure how much time we have to keep going deeper, but let's see when we get to the end. Maybe we can invite Jess or others up on stage. Ryan, back to you about Drupal CI. Drupal CI has also had some recent changes having to do with testing for getting modules ready for Drupal 9. So you want to talk through those briefly?
A long time ago, Drupal CI had a conundrum on how to figure out how to get all of the dependencies that a project needed to test itself, particularly for contrib. And the way that we solved that, it was like, well, let's use Composer to get all of these dependencies in now that we have the Composer facade. And that worked for a while, except when it came to when Drupal 9 was released, what we would normally do was clone Drupal core and then require the module into Drupal core. Well, the problem is if you're trying to work on a module that's D8 compatible and not yet compatible with Drupal 9, it was broken. It wouldn't allow you to do that. And so it required maintainers to commit a patch saying they were Drupal 9 compatible, even when they weren't and they were just working on it. And so we've inverted the build to no longer do that, to use techniques we learned in the packaging pipeline process, honestly, to where we clone the repo first, and then we apply patches, and then we figure out whether or not it needs to come from packages or whether it needs to come from the Git clone itself. And so that helped things so that we're now able to just test any sort of patches that we want to. This also re-enabled feature branch testing on Drupal.org. So if you're running feature branches and you have a branch named issue number dash something something something, it can also be tested, and also laid the groundwork for the merge request feature when that becomes widely available, to be able to test merge requests. And we're in the throes of reevaluating how Drupal CI handles the environment stage, which is basically where it takes the Docker containers and says use this version of PHP and this version of MySQL, and we're trying to expand that out so the community has the ability to build their own environments, because we want things like the search API module to be able to stand up a Solar container. And so Drupal CI right now, and I'm super excited about it, we're going to transition towards using Kubernetes as our backend to run all of our testing on. And so that's where we're at right now. And then a bit.
Awesome, yeah, and it's going to be a big project for sure. And the merge request talk is a nice little segue into an upcoming topic. Let's see here. Here we go. So issue forks and merge requests are something that we've been super, super excited about for a long time. This has been a big deal. And for those of you listening, I don't know if you saw my tweet about this, but both issue forks and merge requests available on Drupal.org. Beta group of projects that have opted in. So it is working today. It was working as of Monday, in fact. So we'll talk about this in a little bit more detail. I'm going to go through a couple of these slides and then hand off to Neil, who I think is going to be able to do a short demo for us. To talk about kind of the component parts in the Drupal space, we think of an issue as a single centralized place to have a discussion about a problem to be solved in Drupal. And part of the reason that we've built some custom tooling around the issue fork and merge request feature is because we want to maintain that single-threaded conversation about the solution, rather than having forks of forks of forks and all the comments happening in those other places where we can't see them. The issue fork is literally the kind of code workspace that you work from. In the sidebar of an issue on Drupal.org where it's enabled, you can create this new issue fork as your workspace. And you can use the GitLab Web IDE or inline editing tools to actually directly make your changes there without having to clone it down, use command line, and that kind of stuff. And of course, the merge request is the feature within GitLab, the pull request feature, that lets you request that your changes be pulled back in by the maintainer. You know, as you can see, this is what the repository on the back end sort of looks like in the GitLab interface. This is what a merge request in general sort of looks like. Let's take a look at some of these stats. So when I said earlier that issues on Drupal.org are usually collaborative, that there's multiple people working on one solution instead of a fragmented bunch of several solutions, may the best one win. Neil pulled these averages, and in Drupal core, there's an average of 5.3 people involved in finding the solution for any issue. In the Olivero theme, the average was 4.3 people. So
do we have a frozen Tim?
I think we have a frozen Tim.
We do.
Yeah.
Sorry, my screen cut
Oh,
out.
you're back.
Can folks still hear me?
Tim? Neil, you want to jump in and do a demo?
Yeah. Let's see.
Had a,
Yeah, I'll just go with demo. Let's see. Share screen. Okay. So I have an issue open that I actually opened about a year ago, apparently. And it has a simple fix that I've already gotten together. It's basically, if you were in the WYSIWYG editor, we have the HR tags wouldn't show up, but now they are. For some reason, margins helped. So every issue in the about 50, probably by the time I go through the next round of enabling beta projects, there's an issue anyone can request that at. They can go to any issue and fork it, and that created that copy of the repository there. So I'll do the command line way today. I can do get remote add and the remote URL and fetch from there. Let's see. Did I copy that wrong? Let's use the web version, since it's probably just a copy thing. So yeah, you can create a branch right away from here. And since we're in the interface, we'll update it via the via GitLab. And let's see, that is, which file is this? Partials, common, basic elements. And this is our theme for Drupal.org that we're updating. Basic elements. And let's do the regular inline editing. The web IDE is a little bit heavier in my laptop's working on things. 190 HR, height 1px, replace that. Margin 1 0. And commit those. There is in the sidebar of all of these, and actually at the top, link back to the issue. Let's see. What's this? There's the link to the issue. So you see that the branch is there. We can compare it, see what we committed. Get that out of the way. And create a merge request. And I will go ahead and put the message in the title. So this is, they'll pre-fill it with the commit message. Submit the merge request. So the merge request is open, and the issue page will have updated as well. So I opened merge request 1. If there's more activity on here, let's see. Oh, there we go. Ryan updated that. So there is a comment. And all of the merge request activity will be piled up in the issue along with the comments there. And since I'm one of the maintainers here, and I've reviewed it, I can go ahead and say it's good. It's just one line of code and merge it. So yeah, all of that's working today. We're working on adding testing right now, and kind of cleaning up any rough edges of the UI that are people testing this find.
Awesome. Thank you, Neil. So as you can see, an end-to-end run of a complete issue fork and merge request demo experience, again, available for beta projects and hopefully to be expanded to a lot more projects very soon. We're not too far away from being able to enable it for kind of all contrib projects and getting it ready to test with a specific first test issue for Drupal core so that we can enable it there as well. I do see a question that I think is relevant, so I'll take it now. The question is about the Drupal Spoons initiative, how we feel about the initiative, potential fracturing of the contrib issue tracking environment, and whether we have a stance, whether someone should or should not use it. So yeah, so I've had several conversations with Moshe about this, and you've seen, I think, several blog posts about it. My understanding, and if Moshe is here watching the session, he can certainly chime in the chat as well, is that the Drupal Spoons initiative is about pushing the boundaries of how the Drupal community collaborates and trying to use different off-the-shelf tools that to see, okay, could we run a Drupal core issue using just built-in GitLab issues rather than using custom Drupal.org issues? Could we use GitLab CI rather than Drupal CI? And it's a way to experiment with that. And for maintainers who are sort of long-time contributors to the Drupal project, who want to experience and experiment with that kind of contribution activity, they can certainly do that. They're welcome to do that. But it's up to the ultimate goal, even from the Drupal Spoon side, in my conversations with Moshe, is not to try and move everybody off of Drupal.org hosted tools. It's to see if they can prove a successful experiment and then advocate for that to be adopted back to Drupal.org. So for example, if at some point they prove that GitLab issues wind up working better in some way, maybe we adopt that or enable that. Or if, as seems like more likely right now, if the GitLab CI system can provide some orchestration tools that we could take advantage of as part of Drupal CI, perhaps we might adopt some of that as well. So that's kind of the way that we currently sort of perceive that initiative and how that's working. So I hope that answered the question. Going to keep running. Oh, if you want to learn more about what's next, you can follow along and get.drupalcode.org/issue. And again, we'll be updating folks in our regular engineering communications, blog posts and things like that as this continues, because we know this is very exciting for the community as a whole. I did want to talk super briefly about the Drupal Steward program. I'm going to go through this quickly because we're also talking about it in the security team panel, which immediately follows this one. So the Drupal Steward program is a program from the Drupal Association to provide network level mitigation, basically a WAF service, where the DA and some of our partners can protect Drupal sites from vulnerabilities. It applies only to the kind of highly critical mass exploitable vulnerabilities. So SA Core 02, the Drupal Geddon 2, as it's colloquial known, would be the kind of thing that could have been protected with this. So the idea would be that people can sign up for this program. They would get alerted in the form of the PSA if an upcoming release was going to be covered with this layer of protection. And then they would have this network level mitigation so that they can choose at their own time and their own pace when to actually install that update, that security patch. So again, we'll talk about this a little bit more in the security session. One of the really exciting things about this program is it is, if you followed some of the DA sessions earlier, it is part of revenue diversification for the Drupal Association and for supporting the security team. So it does cost a little bit extra. It's a service we have to run. It's not just code. But we think that by coming together with those features, that's going to really help us out. And there will be limitations. It can't apply to every type of vulnerability. Some things just can't be protected with a network level mitigation. We do have some partners joining us on the platform side, Acquia and Pantheon, protecting their platforms. We're going to work with agency partners in the supporting partner program. And we have a community tier partner to help us operate the Drupal Association side that any small sites
we are going to cover this
can use via
section
section IO.
Almost those identical slides. We're going to go much slower through them. So you can actually beautiful animations in there.
Yeah, exactly. So we have about 3 minutes left. So I know this is going to be tricky, and I've seen some questions there. So this is about the future of Drupal.org. I'm going to do a single slide that talks about a lot of things that are coming. So there's going to be more work on the collaboration tools, further enhancements to basically to how this merge request stuff works. We're going to revisit the idea of federated login, the notion of having other services that can log in using your Drupal.org identity. We're going to be updating the contribution recognition algorithm based on directives from the recognition committee. And we are going to be working on updates for Drupal.org itself to bring Drupal.org to Drupal 9. That's where I'd like to spend our last couple minutes. Really quickly, we're also collaborating with the core team. We want to continue to collaborate on the auto updates initiative. We were heavily involved in the first phase of that. There's a project messaging in core initiative that we've also been involved in, some ideas about a telemetry initiative. And of course, with Drupal 10 coming in now less than 2 years, we've got to do this usual infrastructural work to support this new, the new release. So very briefly, because we're going to be low on time, maybe Narayan, I'll hand it to you a little bit to talk about what's involved in getting Drupal's infrastructure ready to run Drupal.org on.
Well, there's what's directly involved, and then there's what makes sense to go along with this. What I mentioned in the chat was that this is basically an excuse to modernize how we're doing things a bit, because we're not going to be able to just jump everything forward, because that's just not how development works. So this is a good excuse to containerize some things so we can more easily run multiple versions of PHP without doing the slotted PHP dance that we actually currently do, because we're already running multiple versions of PHP to support things like the Composer facade and things that require a newer version of PHP from a CLI perspective. But it's a very good opportunity to just do this in a more modular, more modern, and more workable way for future development. So from my perspective, it's exciting because I get to actually take an old school infrastructure that is probably one of the oldest school infrastructures I routinely work on, and convert it into a more modern workflow, replace the NFS cluster I built when I was in college, which is nice. It's very exciting. And just kind of get things on a more containerized workflow, possibly deploying Kubernetes at the Oregon State Open Source Lab, which is our hosting partner, possibly doing some mixed hosting. It's unclear what we are actually going to be doing there, except that we are definitely going to be just allowing us to have the very specific requirements that each site needs more separated and then locked down from each other.
From kind of a higher level point of view, I know we're going slightly over, so thank you for bearing with us. We're going to have to jump in just a second. But what we'd like to do for, say, Drupal.org itself, which is such a large site that has so many components, is we're talking about using our CDN layer to direct traffic primarily to the existing Drupal 7 site, but then as we migrate to a Drupal 9 site, redirect traffic to those sections as they come online, so that as we have upgraded individual sections, we can make them available instead of waiting to go all at once. Just to answer our quick questions and then wrap things up, the community can help by taking a look at some of the community modules that are used on Drupal.org and making sure that they're updated and working with Drupal 9. That would be a really good way to help, is to make sure things are ported over. There's a number of modules we use, just like everything else. And yes, all of the Drupal.org subsites are in fact managed by the Drupal Association engineering team. There's no specific leads because there's really only 4 full-time staff plus volunteers and contractors. So we jump around.
Yeah,
every
Localize
site,
is a great site
all
to
right.
start out with.
I'm afraid we have to go ahead, Neil.
Self-contained, and yeah, chase us down on Drupal Slack and let us know what you're good at if you'd like to help, and see if there's a match with what we could use.
Yeah, that would be great. And we'll be around on the contribution day for sure. So I'm afraid we have to close it here because some of us need to go to the security panel that starts in about 15 minutes. But thank you again for all of your support and all of your interest. This was an action-packed update compared to any we've done before. I think we've done more in the last 6 months than maybe in any other 6-month period. I know we're really excited about all of these features, especially the merge requests, and we hope you are too. So thank you all. We'll see you around the con. Enjoy the rest of your DrupalCon. Bye-bye.